Before I share this story with you, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear isn't just another tale of religious mystery. It's a testimony that took me 40 years to find the courage to tell. And it might change how you see the institutions we're taught to trust without question. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe truth should never be buried, no matter how uncomfortable, then stay with me until the end. You might be surprised by what you discover about the places we consider most sacred. 40 years have passed since I first stepped into the cold corridors of Saint Cecilia Convent. 40 years of silence, whispered prayers, and secrets kept like sacred relics. Today, sitting in this small, borrowed room of an abandoned parish, I finally decide to speak. Not for revenge, but for the peace I never found in mandatory prayers. My name was Elena before they made me Sister Magdalena. I was only 18 when I crossed those iron gates, believing I was giving my life to the purest love. The morning mist clung to the Gothic towers like ghostly fingers, and I remember thinking how beautiful the place looked, how deceived I was. I didn't know I was also giving up my voice, my curiosity, and my right to question what I saw. The massive wooden doors creaked open, revealing Mother Agnes for the first time. Even then, something about her cold smile made my skin crawl, though I attributed it to nervousness. She was a tall woman, perhaps in her mid-40s, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to pierce through souls. Her voice carried an authority that left no room for contradiction. "Elena Martinez?" she asked, though she clearly knew who I was. "Yes, Mother. I'm honored to serve God in this sacred place." Her smile never reached her eyes. "We hope your devotion will be lasting." She led me through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The stone walls were adorned with religious paintings whose eyes seemed to follow our every movement. Other sisters moved through the halls like silent shadows, their heads bowed, avoiding eye contact. I found this strange, but assumed it was part of their deep spirituality. "These are the fundamental rules," Mother Agnes explained as we walked. "Silence after evening prayers, restricted areas are absolutely forbidden, and excessive curiosity is a sin of pride. We believe in obedience above all else." We passed a locked door, heavy and reinforced with iron. I couldn't help but glance at it curiously. "That area is under permanent renovation," Mother Agnes said, noticing my gaze. "Administrative matters that don't concern the sisters." I was assigned to a small, austere cell on the second floor. A narrow bed, a wooden crucifix on the wall, a small desk, and a window overlooking the convent's central courtyard. From there, I could see the bell tower and, in the distance, what appeared to be an abandoned cemetery overgrown with vegetation. "You'll work in the library, Mother," Agnes informed me. "Sister Catherine will show you your duties tomorrow. For now, rest. The first bell rings at 5 in the morning for lauds." That first night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the corridors, creating sounds that seemed almost human. Voices, sighs, whispers that my rational mind attributed to the old building settling. But something deep inside me suggested otherwise. The following days passed in a routine of prayers, work, and more prayers. The library became my refuge. It was a vast room with high ceilings filled with ancient books and manuscripts. The smell of old paper and leather bindings was intoxicating. Sister Catherine, Mother Agnes's secretary, showed me the filing system and my responsibilities. Catherine was a nervous woman, perhaps in her 30s, with eyes that darted constantly as if she feared being watched. She spoke in whispers even when we were alone, and I noticed her hands trembled when she mentioned Mother Agnes. "The books are catalogued by century and subject," she explained, her voice barely audible. "But there are some sections that require special permission to access." "What kind of books?" Catherine looked around before answering. "Old records, financial documents, correspondence. Things that... She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she'd said too much. Things that what? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Just focus on the regular books, the ones the sisters use for spiritual reading. But I had already noticed the locked cabinets, the sections covered with dusty cloths, the areas that seemed deliberately hidden. My curiosity, which Mother Agnes had warned against, began to grow like a forbidden seed. It was during my 3rd week that I first noticed the strange behavior of some sisters. Sister Helena, barely 20 years old and one of the newest arrivals, often seemed distressed. I would find her crying in hidden corners, and when I tried to approach her, she would flee as if I carried a contagious disease. Sister Mercedes, who worked in the kitchen, had a nervous tic that made her constantly look over her shoulder. And Sister Concepcion, responsible for maintaining the chapel, sometimes stared at the crucifix with an expression of such anguish that it broke my heart. Most disturbing was how quickly sisters seemed to leave the convent. In my first month alone, 3 sisters were transferred to other missions according to Mother Agnes. But I never saw them pack their belongings, never heard them say goodbye, never received any letters from them after their supposed departure. When I asked Catherine about this, she became even more nervous than usual. "Transfers happen quickly sometimes," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The church has urgent needs, and sisters must be ready to serve wherever they're called." But wouldn't it be natural for them to say goodbye? To take their personal belongings? Personal belongings? Catherine let out a bitter laugh. "We renounced worldly possessions when we took our vows, remember?" Still, something didn't feel right. I began paying more attention to the comings and goings in the convent. I noticed that the transfers always happened at night, always without warning, and always with the most curious or questioning sisters. Saint Cecilia Convent wasn't just a place of prayer, I was beginning to understand. It was a living archive of secrets, where each stone kept whispers that shouldn't be heard, where each shadow hid truths that shouldn't be seen. And I, unknowingly, was becoming the involuntary guardian of the darkest of them all. Everything truly started in the library during my 6th week. I had been assigned as librarian not for my devotion to books, as I had assumed, but because Mother Agnes believed I was discreet enough not to ask inconvenient questions. How wrong she was. The library became my observatory, the place where I learned to read not just words, but silences, gestures, and the secrets that breathed between yellowed pages. One evening, while organizing some manuscripts, I found a loose page tucked between the covers of a book of Psalms. It was a handwritten note, apparently torn from a larger letter. The writing was feminine, desperate. "Can't continue pretending I don't see what happens here at night. The sounds from the basement, the money that comes and goes, the sisters who disappear. God forgive me, but I think Mother Agnes is..." The page ended there, torn, precisely at the most crucial moment. My hands trembled as I held it. Who had written this? When? And most importantly, what had they discovered about Mother Agnes? I looked around the empty library. The late afternoon shadows danced between the shelves like restless spirits. For the first time since arriving at the convent, I felt truly afraid. Not of God's judgment, but of something much more earthly and dangerous. That night, I hid the page under my mattress and tried to pray. But the words seemed empty, meaningless. How could I ask for divine protection when I wasn't sure if this sacred place was truly sacred? It was on a winter night, when the wind beat against the windows like impatient fingers, that I first heard the sound. A light dragging of paper under the main door of the library, always at exactly 11:47 p.m. I thought it was the wind bringing dry leaves, but the sound was too precise, too deliberate. After 3 nights of the same mysterious sound, I decided to investigate. The library had a small window that offered a partial view of the main entrance courtyard. I positioned myself there, my heart beating louder than the matin's bells. The wait seemed eternal. 11:30, 11:40, 11:45. And then, at exactly 11:47, I saw it. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows between the trees. Tall and thin, it moved through the courtyard like smoke, with the certainty of someone who knew every stone of that place. It carried a small leather bag and glided silently across the cobblestones. At the library door, it deposited something and disappeared among the trees before I could distinguish its face. My first instinct was to run to my cell and pretend I had seen nothing, but curiosity proved stronger than fear. I waited 15 minutes before venturing out. The corridor was dark and silent, illuminated only by the faint light of the oil lamps that burned through the night. Under the door, I found an envelope sealed with blood-red wax. There was no recipient name, only a strange symbol engraved in the wax, an inverted cross intertwined with black thorns. The symbol was expertly crafted, as if made with a special seal. My first reaction was to take it to Mother Agnes, but something stopped me. Maybe it was intuition, maybe fear, but I kept the envelope hidden under my habit and returned to my cell. By candlelight, with trembling hands, I opened the letter. Inside, just one phrase in Latin, written with ink that seemed mixed with something darker than usual. Ink. Silentium est aurum, sed veritas est vita. Silence is gold, but truth is life. On the back, coordinates written in pencil and a date, 3 days in the future. I didn't sleep that night. The words echoed in my mind like a dark mantra. Who was sending those letters? Why to me? And most importantly, what would happen on the marked date? The coordinates, when I checked them against a map of the convent grounds I found in the library, pointed to the old abandoned well at the back of the property, a place that had been forbidden to us since our arrival, supposedly because it was structurally unsafe. In the following days, I observed the other sisters with new attention. Sister Helena seemed more restless than usual, if that was possible. She would start at every sound, jump when someone approached her unexpectedly, and I caught her several times staring at Mother Agnes with an expression of pure terror. Sister Catherine, Mother Agnes's secretary, avoided my gaze completely. When I tried to engage her in conversation, she would find excuses to leave quickly. Her nervousness had escalated to the point where she could barely hold objects without dropping them. And Mother Agnes herself walked through the corridors with a rigidity that went beyond her usual severity. She watched me constantly, and I felt her cold gaze following me even when I couldn't see her. During community meals, eaten in traditional silence, I noticed she barely touched her food, too busy observing the faces of the other sisters. But it was Sister Concepcion's behavior that disturbed me most. She had begun talking to herself during prayers, her words barely audible but laden with anguish. I managed to make out fragments. "Forgive me, Lord. I couldn't help her. So much blood." On the night marked in the letter, I remained awake. At 2 a.m, I heard footsteps in the corridor. I cracked open my door and saw Sister Helena walking like a sleepwalker toward the Maya courtyard. She wore only her nightgown and moved with the mechanical precision of someone following orders or driven by an irresistible compulsion. I followed her at a distance, my heart racing. She headed directly to the old abandoned well at the back of the convent, the exact location indicated in the letter. The night was cold and moonless, and I had to stay very close to avoid losing her in the darkness. There, in the pale starlight, I witnessed something that would forever change my understanding of that sacred place. Helena carried a small shovel and began digging methodically beside the well. Her tears shone like silver on her face, but her movements were determined, almost ritualistic. The hole wasn't deep. After 20 minutes of digging, Helena removed something wrapped in dark fabric and placed it carefully in the hole. Even from a distance, I could see it was small, the size of a human head. The smell reached me before I could process what I was seeing. A metallic and sweet odor that made me gag. I covered my mouth with both hands to avoid making noise, but my stomach churned violently. Helena filled the hole again, pressed the earth down with her feet, and scattered some dry leaves over the spot. Then she stood there for several minutes, crying silently and moving her lips in what appeared to be prayers or apologies. I remained hidden until she returned to the convent. Then, moved by a force I couldn't control, I approached the site. The smell of fresh earth mixed with something more disturbing, that metallic and sweet odor that I now recognized as the smell of death. I didn't dig that night. I didn't have the courage, but I knew I had just witnessed something I shouldn't have seen. Something that connected directly to the mysterious letter and the symbol of the inverted cross with thorns. Returning to my cell, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Helena wasn't just restless, she was traumatized. Someone was forcing her to do things that went against her nature. But who and why? The letters kept coming. One per week, always at the same time, always with the same symbol, and always with instructions that led me to discover more pieces of a dark puzzle that was slowly revealing itself. The second letter directed me to the attic, a place I didn't even know existed until I found the hidden staircase behind a tapestry in the third-floor corridor. There, among cobwebs and dust, I found boxes full of old records, personnel files of sisters who had left for other missions, but whose names were never mentioned again. The files were meticulous. Sister Beatrice transferred in 2008 to a mountain convent, but there was no address, no contact information, no follow-up documentation. Sister Mercedes sent to missionary work in Africa in 2010. Again, no specific details, no correspondence. Most disturbing were the personal notes attached to some files. Comments in Mother Agnes's handwriting. 2. Curious about financial matters. Asked inconvenient questions about night visitors. Showed signs of wanting to contact the outside world. I found 12 such files. 12 sisters who had supposedly been transferred, but about whom there was no real information. 12 women who had simply vanished from official records as if they had never existed. The third letter led me to the basement, a place I had only heard mentioned in whispers. The entrance was hidden behind the kitchen pantry, accessible through a door that appeared to be just another storage closet. The basement was vast and divided into several rooms. In one of them, I found blood-stained clothes carefully washed and stored in wooden crates. Habits, undergarments, stockings, all clean but bearing dark stains that no amount of washing could completely remove. In another room, I discovered something even more disturbing, a collection of personal objects. Rosaries, prayer books, small photographs that sisters kept. Hidden despite the rules, objects that should have been taken by their owners when they were transferred to other convents. But it was in the third room that I found the evidence that confirmed my worst fears. Shovels, lime, acid, and other materials used for disposal. The smell of death and chemicals was so strong that I had to cover my nose and mouth with my sleeve to avoid vomiting. With each revelation, I understood more clearly that Saint Cecilia Convent wasn't the peaceful refuge I had imagined. It was a place where secrets were buried, along with those who dared discover them. And I, without realizing it, had become both investigator and potential victim. But who was sending the letters? Who wanted me to discover these horrors? And most importantly, what did they expect me to do with this information? The answer came in the fourth letter, which arrived 3 weeks after I found the basement. This time, the message was longer and more explicit. Sister Magdalena, you have seen the truth that 12 sisters died trying to reveal. Now you must choose, remain silent and become an accomplice, or act and risk joining them in the cemetery behind the well. If you choose truth, meet me in the chapel at midnight on the next new moon. Come alone. Trust no one in the convent. A friend who survived. I read that letter dozens of times, analyzing every word. Someone had survived. Someone had escaped Mother Agnes's murderous control and was now seeking justice for the dead. Sisters. But who could it be? I began reviewing everything I knew about the sisters who had supposedly been transferred. Most had been at the convent for years before disappearing. They knew the place, the routines, the secrets. If someone had managed to escape, it would have to be someone very clever and very desperate. Sister Beatrice's name kept coming back to my mind. According to the files, she had been transferred 15 years ago, but her personal notes indicated she had been investigating financial irregularities in the convent. Maybe she hadn't been killed. Maybe she had somehow escaped and been hiding all these years, planning her revenge. The days leading up to the new moon were torture. I could barely eat, barely sleep. Every look from Mother Agnes seemed like a death sentence. Every conversation with the other sisters felt like it might be my last. I began writing detailed accounts of everything I had discovered, hiding them in different parts of the library in case something happened to me. It was Sister Catherine who finally confirmed my suspicions, though not intentionally. One night, she knocked on my cell door with eyes red from crying. She seemed to be on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown. "Sister Magdalena," she whispered, constantly looking over her shoulder. "I can't take it anymore. The guilt is killing me." I let her in, and she collapsed on my bed, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mother Agnes isn't protecting our community," she said, between sobs. "She's protecting something much worse. The sisters who leave, they don't go to other missions. They never leave here. They're all there, in the old cemetery behind the well." Catherine told me about her role as secretary, how she was forced to falsify documents, to invent transfers that never happened. She told me about the sisters who had questioned too much, who had seen things they shouldn't see, who had refused to accept the official version of facts. The first was Sister Beatrice. 15 years ago, Catherine continued, her voice barely a whisper. She had found inconsistencies in the financial records. She questioned the excessive spending on maintenance when the convent was visibly deteriorating. One morning, she simply disappeared. Mother Agnes said she had been transferred during the night to a mountain convent. But I saw her cell being cleaned afterward. I saw the stains on the floor they tried to erase with bleach. The list of victims was long and terrifying. Sister Concepcion, who had discovered that some of the sacred relics were forgeries sold on the black market. Sister Mercedes, who had caught strangers entering the convent during the early hours. Sister Dolores, who had questioned why certain areas were forbidden to us. Sister Carmen, who had tried to contact her family after months without communication. Each one found something they shouldn't have found, or asked questions they shouldn't have asked, Catherine explained. And each one received the same fate, a fake transfer and a real grave. "And you knew all this? You helped cover it up?" Catherine nodded, ashamed. "Mother Agnes said I was protecting the church's reputation, that scandals would destroy the faith of thousands of believers. She convinced me that some sacrifices were necessary for the greater good. But I know now that was just manipulation. She was protecting her own criminal operation." "What operation?" Catherine looked around fearfully before, continuing. "This convent is just a front, Sister Magdalena. Mother Agnes uses our reputation as devout nuns to run a network of trafficking in false relics, money laundering, and art smuggling. The night visitors aren't pilgrims or inspectors. They're clients, criminals, people willing to pay fortunes for objects they believe are blessed or historically significant." The pieces of the puzzle finally began fitting together. The forbidden areas weren't under renovation. They were warehouses for stolen goods. The strange expenses weren't for building maintenance. They were for bribes and criminal operations. The sisters' disappearances weren't divine transfers. They were murders to protect a lucrative business. "And now you're receiving the letters," Catherine said, gripping my hands with desperate force. "Someone wants you to discover everything, but you need to be careful. Mother Agnes suspects you know more than you should. I heard her talking to Helena about a new transfer being necessary soon." That night, I couldn't pray. The prayers that once consoled me now sounded empty, hypocritical. How could I ask God for protection in a place where his supposed representative was a murderer? How could I seek peace knowing I was walking over the bones of my sisters? The next letter, which arrived 2 days before the new moon, brought a detailed map of the convent with precise markings of the abandoned cemetery. I counted 12 small crosses drawn in pencil, each with initials I recognized from the old personnel files. 12 sisters who had departed, but actually lay in the cold earth, silenced forever. But there was also a 13th cross, drawn in red ink. Below it, a name, Elena Martinez. Next. The message was clear. I knew too much, and my time was running out. The meeting in the chapel might be my last chance to find an ally, or it might be a trap. But I couldn't continue living in fear, wondering when my transfer would come. On the night of the new moon, I prepared carefully. I wrote a detailed letter explaining everything I had discovered and hid it in a place where it would eventually be found. I also gathered some of the evidence I had collected: photographs of the basement, copies of falsified documents, the mysterious letters with their strange seal. At 5 minutes to midnight, I made my way to the chapel. The convent was silent as a tomb, which seemed grimly appropriate. The chapel was illuminated only by the eternal flame that burned before the altar. I knelt in the front pew and waited. At exactly midnight, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding so hard I feared it might be audible. A figure emerged from the shadows between the columns. It was an elderly woman, perhaps in her 60s, wearing a torn and stained habit. Her face was familiar, but marked by time and suffering. Her hair was completely gray, and her eyes held a depth of pain that spoke of years of trauma. "Sister Magdalena," she said softly. "Sister Beatrice?" I whispered. She nodded slowly. "Yes, child. Sister Beatrice, who should have died 15 years ago, but who managed to escape, wounded and traumatized, but alive." She approached carefully, limping slightly. In the dim light of the chapel, I could see scars on her face and hands, marks of violence that had never fully healed. "You're the one who's been sending the letters." "Yes. 15 years I've been waiting for the right person, someone with the courage to see the truth and act on it. 15 years living like a hermit in the forest, documenting everything, planning how to bring justice to our murdered sisters." "How did you escape?" Beatrice sat in the pew beside me, and I could see the weight of years of suffering in her posture. "The night Agnes tried to kill me, I was saved by pure luck. She thought I was dead after beating me unconscious and dragging me to the cemetery. But I woke up as she was digging my grave. I managed to crawl away and hide in the forest until dawn. Then I realized I couldn't go to the authorities. Who would believe a supposedly dead nun against the respected word of a Mother Superior? So, you decided to gather evidence. Evidence that has taken me 15 years to collect. Photographs, documents, recordings of conversations. I've been living in a cave in the mountains, coming down only at night to spy on the convent and document its crimes." Beatrice pulled out a leather bag from under her habit. Inside were hundreds of photographs, sheets of paper covered with notes, and several cassette tapes. I have enough evidence to destroy not only Agnes, but the entire criminal network she serves, but I needed a witness from inside. Someone who could testify that the evidence is authentic and that the crimes are still happening. Why me? Because you have the same curiosity that got me in trouble 15 years ago. And because you're new enough that Agnes hasn't completely corrupted or intimidated you. Yet. The other sisters. Some are accomplices, others are too terrified to act. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing the evidence Beatrice had gathered. It was overwhelming and horrifying. Photographs of nighttime meetings with criminals, recordings of conversations about illegal transactions, detailed documentation of each sister's murder. The operation is much larger than you imagine, Beatrice explained. Agnes doesn't just traffic false relics. She's part of an international network that uses convents and churches as fronts for money laundering, art smuggling, and even human trafficking. Our convent is just one node in a vast criminal web. And the church hierarchy? Don't they suspect anything? Beatrice laughed bitterly. Some are bought, others are willfully blind. Agnes has been very careful to maintain the convent's reputation while conducting her illegal activities. To the outside world, we're a model community of devout nuns. What's the plan? Tomorrow night, there, will be a large transaction, a delivery of stolen medieval manuscripts to international collectors. I have everything ready to document the exchange and capture the participants. But I need you to disable the alarm system from inside and ensure that certain doors remain unlocked. It was a dangerous plan, but it seemed to be our only chance for justice. Beatrice gave me detailed instructions and backup communication methods. We arranged to meet again the following night to execute the operation. As I returned to my cell, I felt a mixture of terror and hope. Finally, there was a possibility of stopping Agnes and honoring the memory of the murdered sisters. But I also knew that if something went wrong, I would join them in the secret cemetery. The next day passed slowly. I tried to maintain my normal routine, but I felt Agnes's eyes on me constantly. During the midday meal, she announced that she would be traveling the following evening for diocesan meetings, clearly a lie to cover her. Criminal appointment. Sister Helena seemed even more agitated than usual. I caught her staring at me several times with an expression of pure anguish, as if she wanted to warn me about something, but didn't dare speak. As evening approached, I positioned myself in the library as planned. From there, I could see the convent's service entrance, where Beatrice had said the exchange would take place. I had already disabled the alarm system using the instructions Catherine had given me months earlier, supposedly for emergency maintenance. At exactly 11 p.m., I saw the first vehicle arrive, a black van without license plates parked next to the entrance. 3 men got out, all wearing dark clothes and moving with the efficiency of professional criminals. Minutes later, I saw Agnes approaching from inside the convent. She carried a large leather case and was accompanied by Sister Helena, who seemed to be there against her will. The exchange was quick and professional. Agnes opened the case, revealing what appeared to be ancient manuscripts. The men examined the documents with magnifying glasses and special lights. After apparently confirming their authenticity, or at least their quality as forgeries, they handed Agnes a briefcase that surely contained money. But something went wrong. One of the men seemed suspicious and began asking questions in a language I couldn't identify. Agnes became agitated, and the conversation escalated into an argument. It was then that I saw Beatrice emerge from the shadows, a camera in her hands, photographing everything. But one of the criminals spotted her. What followed was chaos, shouts, running, the sound of gunshots echoing through the night. I saw Agnes pull a pistol from under her habit, something that shattered my last illusions about her supposedly sacred nature. Beatrice ran toward the forest, followed by 2 of the men. Agnes and Helena disappeared into the convent. I had to make a quick decision: stay hidden and safe, or try, to help the woman who had risked everything for justice. I chose justice. I ran out of the library and followed the sounds of the chase into the forest. The darkness was almost complete, illuminated only by occasional flashes of light from the flashlights the criminals carried. I found Beatrice hiding behind an old oak tree, wounded but alive. One of the men was searching nearby, getting dangerously close to our position. "The documents," Beatrice whispered to me, handing me a waterproof bag. "If something happens to me, make sure these reach the authorities. There's enough evidence here to destroy the entire network. Nothing's going to happen to you. We're going to get out of this together." But even as I said it, I could hear footsteps approaching. We were trapped. It was Sister Helena who saved us. She appeared like a ghost among the trees, carrying a large flashlight that she shone directly into the criminal's eyes, blinding him temporarily. "Run!" she shouted. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of this." We ran through the forest while Helena confronted the man. I heard screams, sounds of struggle, and then a gunshot that echoed through the night like a death sentence. Beatrice and I didn't stop running until we reached a road about 2 kilometers from the convent. There, exhausted and wounded, we finally paused to assess the situation. "Helena saved us," I said, still in shock. "But I know," Beatrice replied sadly. "She paid the price for her conscience, like so many others." We had to act quickly. With Helena dead and the exchange compromised, Agnes would try to eliminate all evidence and probably escape. We needed to contact the authorities immediately. But when we tried to call the police from a phone booth in the nearest village, we discovered that Agnes had anticipated us. She had already contacted the local authorities, claiming that 2 mentally unstable nuns had attacked visitors to the convent and fled into the forest. She's been preparing for this possibility for years, Beatrice realized. She has contacts in the local police, judges who owe her favors, officials she's bribed. We can't trust anyone in this region. Then what do? We go to the capital. I have a contact there, an investigative journalist who has been following religious corruption cases for years. If anyone can help us expose this, it's him. The trip to the capital took 6 hours by bus. During the journey, Beatrice told me more. Details about the criminal network Agnes was part of. It was an international organization that used religious institutions as fronts for a variety of illegal activities. Convents were particularly useful because they aroused less suspicion and had fewer government inspections. The irony is that they use people's faith against them, Beatrice explained. Who would suspect a group of nuns of being international criminals? The journalist, Miguel Santos, received us in his office with a mixture of skepticism and fascination. He had heard rumors about Saint Cecilia Convent for years, but had never been able to gather solid evidence. "What you're showing me here," he said, examining Beatrice's photographs and documents, "this is enough to trigger a major international investigation. But it's also enough to get you both killed if the wrong people find out you have it." Miguel helped us organize the evidence and prepare a comprehensive report. He also arranged for us to stay in a safe house while the investigation began. 3 days later, simultaneous raids were conducted on Saint Cecilia Convent and dozens of other locations across the country. What they found exceeded our worst expectations. The convent's basement revealed not just the evidence room I had discovered, but also a sophisticated storage and distribution center for stolen art, false relics, and forged documents. The secret cemetery behind the well contained the remains of not 12 but 17 sisters who had been murdered over the past 20 years. Mother Agnes was arrested while trying to flee the country with a false passport and nearly $2 million in cash. During interrogation, she finally revealed the full extent of the network she had been part of. Sister Catherine, granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation, provided crucial testimony about how the operation worked. She revealed that several other convents were involved in the scheme, and that Agnes was just one piece of a much larger criminal organization. The trial lasted 8 months and attracted international attention. Media from around the world covered what became known as the Sacred Scandal. Agnes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Several of her accomplices received sentences ranging from 20 to 50 years. But for me, the real closure came during the reburial ceremony for the murdered sisters. Their remains were exhumed from the secret cemetery and given proper burials in consecrated ground. Their families, who had spent years wondering what had happened to their daughters, finally had answers. I spoke at the ceremony, representing not just myself, but all the sisters who had survived the horror. My words were simple, but came from the heart. These women died for the truth. They died because they refused to remain silent in the face of evil disguised as good. Today, their voices are finally heard. Today, justice is finally served. Beatrice, now in her 70s and in fragile health after years of hardship, couldn't attend the ceremony, but she sent a letter that was read aloud. I survived 15 years in the wilderness, sustained only by the hope that one day justice would prevail. Today, I can finally rest in peace, knowing that our sisters didn't die in vain. Their sacrifice exposed a corruption that went far beyond what any of us imagined. May their memory serve as a reminder that truth, however painful, must always triumph over comfortable lies. Today, 10 years after the trial, I live a simple life. I help at a small parish, work with orphan children, and serve as an advocate for victims of religious abuse. The Catholic Church implemented new oversight procedures for convents and monasteries, partly as a result of our case. Saint Cecilia Convent was permanently closed and later converted into a memorial center for victims of religious abuse of power. A plaque at the entrance bears the names of all 17 murdered sisters and a simple inscription: "Truth liberates, even when it costs everything." I often receive letters from people who have read about our case or watched documentaries about it. Some are from other survivors of religious abuse who found courage in our story to speak out. Others are from young women considering religious life who want to know how to recognize the warning signs of corruption. I always respond with the same message: faith and justice are not enemies. True faith demands that we confront evil even when it wears sacred robes. Blind obedience is not virtue. It is cowardice disguised as piety. Sister Catherine now lives in a witness protection program, but we exchange letters regularly. She has devoted her life to helping other survivors of religious trauma and working with investigators to identify other potentially corrupt religious institutions. Miguel Santos, the journalist who helped us, won several international awards for his coverage of the case. He continues investigating religious corruption and has exposed several other similar networks around the world. As for me, I never regretted breaking my vow of silence. I learned that there are times when speaking is more sacred than remaining quiet, when disobedience is more virtuous than submission. Every night before sleeping, I pray for the souls of the 17 sisters who couldn't tell their own stories. I pray that their deaths serve as a warning to future generations. And I pray that no other young woman will suffer what we suffered in that place that pretended to be holy, but was actually hell disguised as heaven. The letters stopped coming after Agnes was imprisoned, but I kept them all as a reminder that there's always someone willing to fight for truth, even in the most impossible circumstances. The strange symbol of the inverted cross with thorns, which once filled me with dread, now serves as a symbol of resistance, a reminder that sometimes we must invert the established order to find truth. Beatrice died peacefully 3 years ago in a small hospital in the capital. I was with her during her final moments. Her last words were, "Elena, tell them that justice delayed is not justice denied. Tell them that truth always finds a way." I fulfilled that promise. This story, this confession, is my final testimony. Not just about the horrors we experienced, but about the courage we found to confront them, about the price of silence and the power of speaking. Truth to power. The wind outside is stopping, and the leaves no longer beat against my window. In this silence I chose, and not one imposed on me. I finally find the peace I searched for all my life. My story is told. The secrets have been revealed. And for the first time since I was 18 years old, I am truly free. But freedom comes with responsibility. That's why I'm sharing this story with you. Not for entertainment, not for shock value, but as a warning and an inspiration. A warning that evil can hide behind the most sacred facades, and an inspiration that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort. If this story has moved you, if you believe that truth must always prevail over comfortable silence, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear that even in the darkest places, light can penetrate. Share it with someone who faces their own impossible situation and needs to know that change is possible. Remember, sometimes the greatest act of faith is refusing to let evil disguise itself as good. Sometimes the most sacred thing we can do is break the silence that protects the guilty and oppresses the innocent. The 17 sisters of Saint Cecilia Convent died for this truth. Beatrice lived in exile for 15 years to preserve it. Catherine sacrificed her safety to reveal it. And I broke 40 years of silence to share it. Their courage lives on in every person who refuses to remain silent in the face of injustice. Their memory lives on in every survivor who finds the strength to speak their truth. Their legacy lives on in every institution that becomes a little more transparent, a little more accountable, because people like them were willing to pay the price for change. This is my final confession, but it's also my first true testimony. I seek no absolution from any priest, because I know true absolution comes from acting correctly when everything around is wrong. I broke my vow of silence, but I kept my vow of faith. Faith in justice, in truth, and in the certainty that good always triumphs over evil, even if it takes 40 years for that triumph to manifest. The candle on my desk is burning low, and dawn is approaching. Somewhere in the distance, church bells are beginning to ring for morning prayers. But today, for the first time in 40 years, I won't be praying in fear or obligation. Today, I'll be praying in gratitude. Gratitude for survival, for justice, for the opportunity to tell this story. And when I close my eyes tonight, I won't see the dark corridors of Saint Cecilia Convent or hear the whispers of buried secrets. I'll see the faces of 17 brave women who died trying to expose the truth, and I'll hear their voices saying, "Well done, Elena, well done." The story ends here, but the truth it contains is eternal. Evil exists, but so does the human capacity to confront it. Corruption spreads, but so does the courage to expose it. Silence can be golden, but as that first, mysterious letter told me so many years ago, truth is life. And life, in all its complexity and danger and beauty, is always worth fighting for. If you have found meaning in this story, if it has touched your heart or opened your eyes or given you courage, then the 17 sisters of Saint Cecilia Convent did not die in vain. Their voices, silenced by violence, continue to speak through stories like this. Their courage, ended by murder, continues to inspire through testimonies like this. This is their legacy. This is their gift to the world. This is their final victory over the forces that tried to bury them in silence. Remember their names, remember their courage, and remember that in a world where evil often wears the mask of good, the greatest act of faith is the determination to see clearly, speak truthfully, and act courageously, no matter the cost. The wind has stopped completely now. The leaves are still. And in this perfect silence, the silence of peace rather than oppression. I finally understand what Beatrice meant when she said that truth is life. Truth doesn't just preserve life, it gives life meaning. It transforms mere existence into purpose, mere survival into triumph. I am Elena Martinez, once Sister Magdalena, survivor and witness. This is my story, but more importantly, this is their story. The story of 17 brave women whose voices were silenced but whose truth could not be buried. May their memory be a blessing. May their courage be an inspiration. And may their truth continue to shine light into the darkest corners of a world that too often prefers comfortable lies to difficult truths. The story is told. The testimony is complete. Justice has been served. And finally, after 40 long years, I am free. If Elena's courage to break 40 years of silence has moved you, if you believe that truth must prevail over comfortable lies, then I ask you to do something simple but powerful. Share this story. Not because it's entertaining, but because somewhere, someone might be facing their own impossible situation and needs to know that speaking up is possible, that justice can prevail even against the most powerful institutions. The 17 Sisters of Saint Cecilia can't speak for themselves anymore, but their story lives on every time someone chooses courage over silence. What other stories do you think need to be told? What other truths are waiting for someone brave enough to speak them? Let me know in the comments below. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. Remember, the greatest act of faith isn't blind obedience. Sometimes it's having the strength to question what we're told is sacred, especially when lives hang in the balance.